Welcome to the channel. This is Jay Mancini, where we keep the wheels rolling and the cash flowing. All right, guys, so today I want to talk to you about something that is extremely important, especially when you're new and about to start in the dump truck business. A lot of people ask me all the time really good questions, and they usually have something to do with how to get started, how to make money, and what are the keys or the principles to starting in the dump truck business. All of that is great, but guys, just as important as the 10 keys to starting a dump truck business or the 10 things you need to know to start a dump truck business, there's also this right here, guys, 10 money mistakes to avoid. So believe me, this video is very important. And if you're about to start in the dump truck business, this video is a must watch. With that being said, guys, let's dive in. All right, guys, number one thing that I see that people make mistake when they're starting in the dump truck business, and it's definitely a big money mistake, is buying a truck with no work. Now, if you haven't already heard me say this in other videos, let me tell you guys, buying a truck without having work, what I mean is not having work already lined up for the dump truck. Now, believe it or not, guys, I couldn't tell you how many people I've seen and heard of that go out and they buy a dump truck, and sometimes even a six-figure dump truck, and to make matters worse, guys, they buy them on credit. Yes, personal credit, and they don't have any work lined up. Now, to me, this is number one biggest mistake, because guys, you're making an investment on a truck, even if it's only putting 10 or 20 or 30,000 down, but you're still using your personal credit. This is to me like buying a house without having the finances to pay for your mortgage. To me, it's the same thing. It's on the same level, right? So when you buy a six-figure dump truck, and even if it's not a six-figure dump truck, okay, and it's only a $60,000, $70,000, or $80,000 dump truck, you're still talking about a lot of money, especially if you buy it, and let's just say it's not on credit, but it's all up front, and you might have been saving money for a long time to buy this truck cash. Guys, it's still a lot of money, and it's a big responsibility, but I couldn't tell you how many times I've seen people buy a truck, and then next thing you know, they're like, man, I need work. I only worked 2 days this week, or I only worked 3 days this week. And the reason why, guys, they didn't have work lined up for the dump truck, okay? So how do you line up work for the dump trucks? And I've said this in many videos before, guys, and you can see the videos that we have on how to find work. But guys, first thing you need to do to have work lined up for your dump truck is you need to go out there before you even buy it, and you got to make those connections. You got to make those contacts, right? Like I've said before, and you've heard me say this before, and if you haven't, you need to watch those other videos where I'll show you how to find work, okay? Now, you need to make those contacts, make those connections, and make sure that you've already talked to somebody. You already have agreements in place that whenever you buy your dump truck, you already have work lined up for the dump truck. It could be a broker, it could be a gravel, a asphalt, a sand supplier, it can be a pit, a quarry, whatever it may be, okay? Or better yet, multiple sources. But you need to have work already established for that dump truck. Number two, guys, buying the wrong truck. What do you mean, Jay, buying the wrong truck? Well, if you haven't seen the videos, we have a video also on what I recommend and the things that I show you to look for when you buy the right dump truck. Why? Because yes, there's such thing as buying the right type of dump truck. I've seen guys that go out there and buy trucks that are really not cut out to be a dump truck, and then next thing you know, they're having to spend a whole bunch of money to reconvert or switch out things in the truck to make it into a dump truck. But better yet, guys, even worse, sometimes they buy a truck that's not in good condition. So I've seen guys when they go out and they buy a dump truck and it looks like a good dump truck, but then it has a bunch of mechanical problems, and they might have bought it for X amount of dollars, but then they're having to put an extra 20 or 30% more on the truck than what they originally purchased it for. So no one wants to go through that headache of saying, I spent X amount of dollars on a truck and now I'm having to put another $20,000 or $30,000 on a dump truck because it had a bunch of issues, right? So buying the wrong dump truck is also a major issue, and it's a thing you want to avoid. Why? Because it could cost you a lot of money. Not to mention that you find out and say, you know what? This truck could have a bad engine. It could have a bad transmission. It could have bad differentials. There's a lot of other things that could go wrong with the truck. So you need to make sure that these are things you're looking out for. And again, you also want to make sure, is this truck really built to be a dump truck? Because in the long run, it can help you avoid future repair costs. Not to mention also the maintenance. The other thing, guys, about buying the wrong dump truck, you may find a good dump truck, everything checks out, engine, transmission, everything else may look good, But then let's just say you buy a tandem dump truck, and next thing you know, everybody in your area is wanting super dumps. And not to mention, I'll give you a great example. Out on the West Coast, my friends in Arizona and California, what's up, my people? You already know what I'm talking about. A lot of the guys out there, they say, Jay, there's no work out here for tandems. So what does that mean? You may be a guy that goes out and buys a really nice tandem dump truck, but they're wanting like quads, or they're wanting, super dumps, trucks that haul 20 or 25 tons. They call them Super 16s over there, or Super 18s. Next thing you know, your tandem's just sitting at the yard and you have no work for it. Well, that's not going to do you any good, right? No matter how good of a condition the truck is, if you don't have work, once again, you bought the wrong type of dump truck, meaning it was a good dump truck, but that's not the dump truck that was best suitable for the area that you live in. And I also have videos on that. So you got to make sure that you do your due diligence and find out, what are the dump trucks that are getting work? Are they quads? Are they super dumps? Are they just tandems? Are they triaxles? Maybe even end dump trailers or belly dumps. I wouldn't know, but I can tell you this, only you would know what's best in your area, right? But one thing I would definitely tell you is do that research and make sure you find out what type of dump truck is more suitable, meaning what type of dump truck is the dump truck that is most often utilized in my area. Number 3, guys, not having a reliable mechanic. If there's someone that knows about not having a reliable mechanic, I'm going to be very upfront with you. It's myself. Yeah, Jay Mancini knows. When I first started in the business, if you don't know my story, I bought a truck. Technically, even though I really didn't know it at the beginning, I was a for sale by owner, but I found out pretty soon that I bought a truck that had a bad engine, right? That's why the guy ended up selling to me. But again, I was new. It was a mistake that I made, but I don't want you to make that mistake. So I went to a mechanic, and to top it off, guess what happened? The guy didn't know what he was really doing, but because I didn't know what I was doing, right? And I didn't know a mechanic, I ended up spending thousands of dollars getting an engine repaired. And then I come to find out like 6 months later, the engine fails again, right? So I had to get it repaired twice. I don't want that to happen to you. So listen, guys, you need to make sure that you find a reputable mechanic. Jay, how do I find a reputable mechanic? I'm new to the business, or I'm not even in the business. Again, guys, connections, contacts, talk to people that are already in the dump truck business. Pick their brains. Be like, hey, by the way, your truck looks really good, man. It's in great shape. Who's your mechanic? Oh, okay. Can I get his phone number? Okay. Can you recommend him to me? Do you recommend him? What kind of work has he done for you? These are the kind of things that you want to ask, right? And not only with one guy, but multiple guys, multiple owner operators, because you want to ultimately have what I call a Rolodex of mechanic, and, go up to them, go visit their shops, check out their shops. Does it look like they know what they're doing? Are they busy? Do they have a lot of trucks in their shop? These are things that I would look for, and that's how I would find a reputable mechanic. Number 4, guys, do I know about this? Yes, hiring bad drivers. And let me tell you guys, it took me a long time to find good drivers. Again, I didn't have enough experience. So at the beginning, I was just hiring whoever I could. But guys, I also have videos on that. I have a video specifically talking about the things that I look for in a driver. So make sure you check that out as well. But hiring bad drivers, guys, I hate to say it, but I'll be upfront with you. It can make you or break you. What do I mean by hiring bad drivers? Well, if you are not the one driving that truck, and I have videos on that as well, I highly recommend that you know that whoever you hire can make you or break you. Meaning that driver is either going to make your money or could potentially break you, right? And literally put you out of business. Because guess what? He's the one that's in control. He's the one behind the wheel every day. Not to mention so many mistakes that a driver could make that could potentially cost you your business or cost you your investment in your dump truck. So make sure that if you're not the one driving, you know who you're hiring, and make sure you do your due diligence. Make sure you check for references. Make sure that he knows what he's doing, and that most importantly, not only is he a good driver, but he's also reliable. All right, guys, so that leads me to number 5, having the wrong insurance coverage. So just like I talked about having bad drivers, guys, having the wrong insurance coverage. All right, guys, so I'm going to tell you something I've seen happen in the past, and this is just one of the many stories that I have. One of the guys that used to work for us, okay, really nice guy, and the guy decided that he was going to retire. He's an older guy, so he ended up putting a driver on the truck that he used to drive, and then he also had his nephew driving his other truck. The guy owned 2 trucks, and this is why it's so important to make sure that you have the right type of insurance coverage, guys, okay? And I've also done videos on this before that you can make sure you watch. Guys, it's so crucial because this guy that I know, he goes off, he hires a driver, and now he's not driving the truck anymore. The new driver's driving his truck. Well, guess what happens? The guy ends up having an incident. Not an accident, an incident. He ends up hitting a power line. Well, when he hits the power line, he literally pulls the entire power line and the grid. Now we have a massive problem at a construction job site. Everybody's out of power, and now now there's chaos at the job site. They had to call out on an emergency job. They had to send somebody out there to go out and fix these power lines, make sure that everybody had power up again on the job site. Well, guess what happens now? His insurance coverage has to come in and pay for the damages. Well, there's one big problem with that. The guy that he had just hired and put to drive his dump truck that caused this incident in the power lines, unfortunately, wasn't on his insurance. They can say, Jay, how is that possible? My friend that owned the dump truck, unfortunately, he didn't go over his documents, and even though he mentioned to his insurance agent, make sure that you add my new driver. I'm no longer driving my dump truck. I hired somebody to drive my dump truck. Guess what happened? The insurance agent never put the driver on his policy. Now the guy goes out there his first week, he hits a power line, causes thousands of dollars in damages. And now there's a big issue because his insurance company doesn't want to cover. Why? Well, quite naturally, they're not, because that driver is not on that policy. So to tell you what happened, guys, at the end of the day, he's personally liable. To make matters even worse, they're coming after us. They say, well, Jay, you're the one who hired these guys. So now not only am I having to have my insurance step in and cover, but he's also personally liable. And that created a big issue that took a lot of time in mitigation, but finally we were able to get it resolved and we were able to solve the issue. But don't let that happen to you, because I'll tell you one thing, not only are you gonna have a lot of headaches, but it's gonna cost you a lot of money. Guys, another thing I've seen about not having the right insurance coverage, and this actually happened to myself as well, guys. When I first started in the business, I had gotten a quote from an insurance agent, and the quote was, reasonably priced. I thought it was a little higher than what I wanted to pay, but keeping in mind that I was new to the business, I said, well, you know what? It is what it is. And I went ahead and I got coverages to that insurance agent, and I was paying the bill. And about 8 or 9 months in, before the year was up, I got a call from another friend, and he's like, hey man, I just got a quote from this insurance agent. Man, I got a great quote. And when he gave me the number, I was like, man, that's great. I want to save money too. So I go to this insurance guy's office. This was years ago. And I step in there and the guy's like, yeah, let me quote you, And next thing you know, I give him the info and I tell him, these are my drivers. This is the trucks. And he gives me a quote. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I like it, great. So the guy's like, all right. So what happens next is I cancel with my current provider, right? And I'll go ahead and he provides insurance coverages and I'll get the insurance through him. And next thing you know, guys, I walk out of there. I feel great. I feel like, man, I saved a lot of money. I'm going to save thousands of dollars throughout a year. And hey, this is great for my bottom line. This is great for my expenses. But there was one problem, guys. 60 days later, 2 months later, this was through an insurance agency that don't want to mention their name, but the insurance provider actually sends me a letter, and I read the letter and it says, we want pictures of your truck. Well, guess what? I'm like, okay. I go off, I take pictures of my dump trucks, I send pictures to the insurance provider, and next thing you know, they send me a letter like within 10 days saying, your policy has changed and now it's gonna double the amount of what I was paying. And when I start reading it, it's telling me that originally the quote I had and what I was originally paying for was box trucks. Now, if you're not familiar with box trucks, they're very different type of trucks. They're not heavy duty trucks like dump trucks. They're not out on a construction job site, okay? They're naturally not gonna probably be as liable or as big as of a liability as a dump truck is. Next thing you know, I'm calling the insurance agent. I'm like, hey, what's going on, man? I got this letter from the insurance provider. They were asking for pictures of my truck. I send them pictures of the trucks, and next thing you know, 10 days later, they're saying that either they're gonna cancel the policy or my coverage is gonna double in cost. Guess what happens? The middleman, meaning the agent, says, oh man, I'm not sure, we made a mistake. Well, come to find out, the guy has no solution for me. So now I have to go back to another agent and to my previous agent to see if he can requote me. Ended up having to get a quote from a whole different agent, and I ended up having to pay another lump sum of money just to get a new insurance coverage through a new agent. And guys, at the end of the day, it was problems, it was headaches, and again, it was a big money mistake, so don't let it happen to you. All right, guys, number 6, not managing expenses, and I have a video on that as well. Jay, what do you mean by not managing expenses? I'm talking about insurance, fuel, maintenance, unexpected repairs, driver if you're gonna have a driver. So you guys already know you gotta make sure that you know what your expenses are. You're gonna have diesel as well, and a lot of other things that are gonna come in. So guys, I highly encourage that before you even buy a dump truck, know what these expenses could potentially be. And I know you might not have the exact dollar amount, but again, guys, talk to somebody that's already in the dump truck business. Go out there and make these connections, make these contacts, talk to people, and find out, hey, if you don't mind, can you tell me what you pay on insurance? What are your fuel expenses on a monthly basis? How much do you ballpark pay the driver? Can you tell me, what do you pay to store your truck every month? If you have a storage facility where you park your truck, these are all the questions that you need to ask and know for you to have a good general idea, okay, of what your monthly expenses could potentially be before you even buy a dump truck, right? So again, guys, it's very important to manage your expenses before you even buy the dump truck. Know what you're getting yourself into, right? Because if you know that a truck could potentially make you $15,000 or $20,000 a month, but you don't know what the expenses are, then you might not know what your bottom line may be, right? So just like you need to know potentially how much money that truck can make a month, right? You also need to know what the expenses could end up being every month. So that's gonna leave you with what I call your net dividends or your bottom line. So with that being said, guys, know your expenses. All right, guys, number 7, not knowing your market value. What do you mean by market value, Jay? Market value simply means knowing what you need to get paid, knowing what the market rate is in your city or your town or wherever it is you're located. Let me give you an example, guys. And this actually just happened a few weeks ago. We were on a job, okay? We got hired by an individual that was an actual developer. I've never dealt with him before. I knew about him and we talked a couple times, but we never actually did business together. He bought a large piece of property, okay? He was actually developing a storage facility. And he calls me and he's like, hey, we talked a while back and I know you're in the dump truck business. Well, I need your services. Can you give me a quote? Well, guys, we gave him a quote. And next thing you know, he says, hey, Jay, can you do it for less? I said, look, I cannot do it for less for the following reasons. And I explained to him the reasons why I couldn't do it for less. And one of the things, if you don't already know, I take pride in servicing customers, okay? Not necessarily being the cheapest, but servicing them, okay? So I explained that to him and he said, okay, Jay, you know what? It sounds good. So he goes off and we make an agreement. And the following week we go out onto the job. Well, I send several trucks to the job, but you know what I find out? That there's another truck on the job site that I didn't hire, which I have not a problem with, but there was one little problem. The guy he hired, I find out through my guys, he was getting paid $25 less. Yeah, $25 less than my guys. And what I mean by $25 less, I mean, guys, I'm talking about an average of $250 less a day. Now, that's a significant difference, okay? Why is this guy charging him less? That's for him to know, but at the end of the day, there's a big problem with that because what happens is the following, guys. When he's out there, right, and he's doing work for less, he's hurting the market, okay, because the guy doesn't know the actual value of what the market is going for. He doesn't know what the market is going for, meaning if the trucks are going to be hired for, let's just say, $80, $90, or $100 an hour, but this guy's only charging $50 or $60 an hour, well, quite naturally, he's not only hurting the market, right? But he's really hurting himself as well. So, I really wanted to talk to the guy and maybe educate him a little bit. But then at the end of the day, you know what? I let him do his business and I do mine. We had multiple trucks. He was just one guy that owned his truck and the guy had just gotten started. So maybe he just didn't know any better. So I say that, guys, to make sure that's not your case. So make sure you know your market value and make sure you're getting paid what you deserve. And with that being said, guys, that leads to number 8, talking about getting paid. What I mean by getting paid, not only getting paid what you deserve, but also making sure you actually get paid, guys. Guys, I couldn't tell you how many times I've heard stories from owner-operators that only own 1 or 2 trucks, okay, that go out and they do their deals directly with somebody who hires them, whether it's a developer, a contractor, or a so-called contractor, okay, or even brokers. And guess what happens, guys? They either get paid late or sometimes times they don't get paid at all. Now, this is a big problem, right? Not getting paid, obviously it's a big issue. So guys, I tell you, make sure you do some research before you go off and you start doing work with somebody that you don't know or you've never heard of, or you don't know anyone that has done work for these people in the past. Do some research, make sure you go online, try to research the company, okay? And find out, do they have an office? If they do, where are they located? Make sure you give them a call. And look, don't be afraid to also maybe ask for some references like, hey, this job that I'm gonna do for you, the job is located on, XYZ street. That job or that project, is that for the county? Is that for the city? Is that for a developer? Who's the owner of that job? Because again, if you're doing it for a contractor, they may be hired by somebody else, right? They could be hired by the city or the county or the municipal district. So these are things that you need to know just to kind of have some reassurance that you're going to get paid, right? Also, talking about getting paid, you need to make sure that you know your terms. So always set that up front. Have those expectations up front and be clear about it. Make sure that you have an agreement. Hey, am I going to get paid on a weekly basis? Is it going to be a bi-weekly basis? Because I can't tell you this. Most contractors, if you don't set that agreement up front, you know what they're going to tell you? They're going to tell you, hey, you have to wait till I get paid, or it may be net 30 and maybe net 60, or maybe even worse, they may pay you whenever they feel like paying you. So you definitely need to make sure you do your due diligence to make sure you're going to get paid. All right, guys, number 9. Only one source of work. Now, this is a big money mistake. I've seen guys that start in the business, everything's good, they avoid these 8 mistakes, but when they get here, that's the first mistake they make, which at least they've avoided the first 8, but this is still a big money mistake. Why? Because they only have one source of work, meaning they stuck to just that one person or that one business or that one contractor or that one supplier that gives them work. And then all of a sudden, just to give you an example, let's just say they're working for a big gravel supplier, okay? And that gravel supplier may have a contract with the city, okay? That contract may only be for 1 year or maybe 3 months or 6 months. And now they're needing a bunch of trucks to supply all that gravel for this huge project. It could be, a road and bridge project, right? And now they need hundreds and thousands of tons of material. But after 3 months or 6 months or maybe even a year, the job is done. They don't no longer need any more gravel, okay? And there's no other jobs that are to that magnitude, and there may only be small little jobs here and there. Well, guess what? At one point in time, that supplier might have had 50, 80, or 100 or 200 trucks running for them. But now they really only need 10 or 20 trucks, okay? Or maybe even 30 trucks. But let's just say you're one of the new guys, right? Because you're new to the business and you were one of the last guys to get on board. Well, guess what happens now? You're probably not going to have any more work, right? So don't let that happen to you. And how do you avoid that? By not having just one source of work. You need to have multiple sources, guys. And even if everything looks good and everything seems all peachy, still don't matter, guys. You still always need to be on the hunt, okay? You need to be always on the phone, making new connections, making contacts, and looking for what I call new opportunities, okay? Is there other suppliers? Are they paying a better rate than your current supplier? Do they have a lot of work coming up, right? Are there other contractors that may be needing trucks that you may be able to do work with directly, okay? And even if it's with a broker, you never know. Maybe the broker may have a contract for 3 or 4 years on a real big project, and that may be a better option. So these are things that you got to keep in mind, and make sure you don't limit yourself to just one source of work, because it can ultimately, in the long run, cost you money. All right, guys, number 10, last but not least, scaling too fast. What do you mean by scaling too fast, Jay? Well, you avoided all 9. Let's say you avoided the first 9. So now you think you're on the run. You think you're the man or the woman, and you think you're doing great. And you're like, man, I love the dump truck business, but one problem. All of a sudden, you think everything's all great and you buy another dump truck and things seem great, but for whatever reason, there's external factors, right? And all of a sudden, work gets slow and you're still relatively new to the business, right? And now you have 2 dump trucks instead of 1 dump truck. And let's say you haven't paid off that first dump truck if you did get it using credit. Or even if you didn't, right? But you bought the second one using credit. Well, now we go back to square one, right over here. So you want to avoid that. And what do I mean by scaling too fast? Guys, I highly recommend before you buy your second dump truck or multiple dump trucks, have at least 1 year in the business, guys. Because I promise you that 1 year, you're going to learn a lot of things about the business, especially if you're always staying with an open mind and always looking and seeking bigger and better things and new opportunities. You're going to learn a lot, right? I always tell guys, hey, no matter how good things look right now, and you're making good money, give yourself at least a year before you buy another dump truck. Especially, not to mention, if you bought a new dump truck, right? At the beginning, you may be the one driving it, but when you buy the second one, you can't be driving two trucks, right? You can't be at two places at the same time. You're gonna have to hire a driver, so you gotta remember that. It's gonna change the game when you have to hire a driver. New responsibilities, added cost, et cetera, right? So give yourself at least 1 year before you buy your next dump truck. Make sure you learn the ropes. Make sure you learn from whatever mistakes you've made before you buy the next dump truck. Otherwise, it can and it will come back to haunt you. All right, guys, so if you avoid these 10 things, I got great news for you. You know what that means? You're gonna make money. So just as valuable as knowing the keys to the dump truck business and knowing all the other things that I've talked about in the videos, these 10 things are just as valuable. So make sure you try to avoid these money mistakes. And I will tell you one thing, there's definitely money to be made. But again, guys, avoid these 10 mistakes. You already know what it is, guys. This is Jay Mancini. We keep the wheels rolling and the cash flowing. Make sure you comment below. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.